All right. Hi, everyone. I am Dana Lauer from Project ARC. And if you've listened to DIST before, you've heard this spiel, but I'm going to do it for all our new listeners. Many of you know me from my work in pushing project-based learning into a more authentic space so that our learners have the opportunity to affect real change in their worlds. In fact, the ARC in Project ARC stands for authenticity, relevancy, and community connected learning. So for the past 20 years, this work has really been my passion. And I like to say that the journey has been rewarding, but bumpy at times. And it's probably been bumpy because I've definitely been designated that labeled person as being disagreeable sometimes in the education space. So in November of 2024, an entire year ago, I put out a call on LinkedIn to connect with me if you considered yourself to be a disagreeable person in the education space. This post was actually prompted by a quote from Adam Grant's New York Times bestseller, Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. So I'm going to take a moment and read that quote to you real quickly. And it says, the ideal members of a challenge network are disagreeable because they're fearless about questioning the way things have always been done and holding us accountable for thinking again. There's evidence that disagreeable people speak up more frequently, especially when leaders aren't receptive, and foster more task conflict. Now, Adam Grant wasn't specifically talking about education, but of course, that's immediately where my brain went. And so I had no idea what DIST would turn into. In fact, I have no idea what our guests are going to say as this conversation unfolds over the next 40 minutes or so. Hopefully, there will be some disagreements as we engage in conversation. I'll add the disclaimer that our guests' viewpoints don't necessarily reflect that of Project ARC's. It's not necessarily an endorsement from us, but rather Tim and I want to engage in these conversations so that we can learn and grow as we think again.
Thank you for that introduction, Dana. And it's my pleasure as a co-host of DIST to be able to introduce our guest tonight. My name is Tim Kubik. I'm coming to you from Colorado. I've been working with Dana now for 11 years. We just celebrated our 11th anniversary as Project Arc last week. I'm really excited tonight to bring three people together who, as we gathered initially, we learned we have a lot more in common than we may have disagreements over, but they all bring interesting perspectives. We have Cristina Kottmann, who is coming to us from Rio de Janeiro. We have Colleen Kelley coming to us from Tucson, and then Zach Chase, who's been, as he said, weaving in and out of our lives at Project Arc on and off for a couple decades now, who's coming to us from Illinois. And we're going to start out tonight. I'm going to ask Cristina to introduce herself and share her DIS word for the evening, a word that starts with DIS. Cristina, take it away.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Dana. Hello, everyone. So I'm Cristina Kottmann. I taught in international schools for 10 years. And that took me all over the world, as you can imagine. I was in Saudi Arabia, India, and Brazil, and I taught elementary school. So I always loved helping learners learn to read and write and ask questions about the world. So my word, as I've stepped into this new role as a consultant for school leaders, helping them understand systems and plant well-being and rehumanizing education into their schools, my word is discontinued, because I'm wondering what we should discontinue in education?
Great place to start. Thank you, Christina. And we'll turn now to Colleen. Colleen, introduce
Hi,
yourself and
everyone.
do this word.
I am Colleen. I'm a retired chemistry professor, and for 30 years, I taught organic chemistry to students who were brilliant in all the other classes and getting A's except for mine. So I have thousands of students and lots of tears. And it brought me to the question of why do my students think chemistry is so hard? So towards the end of my retirement, I started answering that and recognized that they were coming to college and for the most part were something I called, based on my research, molecularly illiterate. I retired for about 4 months and now landed a job at an elementary school to make a change. So I am the science teacher for pre-K to fourth grade. So I went from 24-year-old graduate students to 4-year-olds in 4 months. I've got the span. And because of all this and my experiences, my word is dissolve because I'm on a mission to dissolve the fear of chemistry molecule by molecule. Because if
Mhm.
I can do that, if I can dissolve fear, I can make room for discovery.
All right. Thank you for that. And it seems dissolving is an appropriate word for a chemistry teacher. So good choice. Zach Chase, tell us about yourself and share your dis word.
Sure. I grew up here in Illinois. And then, not unlike Christina, when I graduated, I thought I should leave. And so at the job fair for my university, sat down with only districts that were from somewhere other than Illinois. Not that I don't love Illinois, it was just ready to move on.
Mhm.
And so started my teaching career in Sarasota. Florida, and then moved up to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, two very different places. And had the privilege and found very early on that inquiry-driven project-based learning was where it was for me. And developed a much better vocabulary for the pedagogy that I was drawn to. From there, I got really frustrated because we were entering a period in the U.S. where ed policy was starting to get made more and more frequently by people who had no experience in education. And so left the classroom to take on a graduate degree in education policy because I didn't want to be a hypocrite. Moved into that space, moved out to Colorado, where I worked at a district and where I met Tim, and focused on instructional technology coordinator. I was the K-12 ELA coordinator, the library and media services coordinator, coordinated a lot of things, and also have done kind of two tours of service with the U.S. Department of Education in the Biden and Obama administrations, where I led the writing of the 2024 and 2016 National Educational Technology Plans. And my dis word, and I wanted to go back and listen to all the episodes again, disambiguation, because I didn't want to pick
Disambiguation.
one that somebody else had. So yeah, disambiguation.
All right. So how long did you spend searching through the dictionary for that
It
one?
is one of my favorite words.
Okay, good.
Like
Good.
ambiguity is a fun word, but also disambiguation because they don't necessarily sound like they're the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so we've got three dis words that aren't exactly negative words necessarily. The dis there is sort of suggesting something is being taken away, right? Discontinue, dissolve, and disambiguation, right? Anybody want to build on one of those words, or do you want me to try to take a stab at it? If you're willing, go for it.
I'll build on Colleen's word of dissolve because I was considering that one as well. I think there's a lot there's a lot of ideas in education that add this layer of complexity that almost like a science experiment, you're just tipping more items into the jar. And sometimes we get lost in understanding what we're actually even trying to do. It's just fun and playful, or it's chaos. So if we can kind of dissolve the layers of complexity that are built into the education system, I think we can start actually deciding, where is this all going? How are we going to reformat and redesign things for a future?
I like that a lot. I like that a lot, Christina. Colleen, can I jump in? I know it was your word,
Yeah,
but I
no,
want to
go
jump
for
in on
it.
that one as well. You said that word. One of my favorite books as of late is a book called Subtract by Leidy Klotz. Professor, I also think it's really funny. I don't know if Dana and Tim, you planned this. We've got elementary. I taught middle and high school. We've got college. We've got the PK
Hmm.
16 representation going on. But Klotz writes about how removing things is not an intuitive moment in design, right? And when we're trying to fix problems. And I want to hear what Colleen has to say about that from a chemist perspective. But he talks the story, the genesis for the book is he was building with Legos with his son, and they were building two sides supports for a bridge, and they were at different heights, so the bridge was going to be crooked, and so they needed to fix it. And his young son took bricks off to make the taller one shorter, and it didn't occur to him. So Klotz was reaching to add more bricks, and his son saw the solution in subtraction, and that led to this whole line of research that he's done. And I think it's really fascinating to think, how do we take things away to solve the problems that we're facing?
Yeah, that's an awesome example, and
Hmm.
I hadn't thought about the taking things away part in that regard. But I 100%, I know I'm supposed to disagree with you, but I don't. But
Okay.
here's where I do disagree with the status quo, and I'm just going to call it science education. I'm not going to call it chemistry because really the last decade I've been spending on science education just globally and like, pre-K through 16. What is it? Because we have horrendous failure rates and things like that. So what I have dissolved or taken away is I fight against my admin at the elementary school. Don't give me any more stuff. Like
Hmm.
they keep wanting to have the photo moment, like of my kids coding or my kids,
Mm.
doing something that looks techie. I'm like, I have five essential science literacies that are like the little black dress of science, and these came from my research at the university. And these five science literacy are going to carry them from now, 100 years from now, because they were also valid 100 years previous. And it's not based on stuff, it's molecular literacy, which was my primary discovery,
Hmm.
but dimensional literacy. Can they go 2D to 3D, 3D to 2D? Quantitative literacy. Can they tell a story with data? Do
Hmm.
they look at numbers as parts of a story instead of whatever is labeled as math? I don't even know what that means in school anymore. Like they're numbers or symbols. I don't know. Like what are y'all messing that up for? And then observational literacy. And that's usually the only thing that's taught in for the littles in K through 5
Hmm.
science. And then evidence-based literacy. Are you able to go through an evidence base? Those five things, that's it. You don't need all the stuff and this notion, sorry, don't get me started, but this notion of hands-on. I could have the best slime maker in the world come to my class at the university and they could get an F. So like no amount of slime making in volcanoes makes you a good scientist. It's just bad for the environment.
Hmm.
And it's it's not a volcano, it's an acid base reaction. A volcano has lava and it's hot. Like, why are we conflating these things? Like, there's so much bad stuff going on. And it took me from higher ed to see, it took me 30 years to be like, this isn't working,
Hmm.
to now seeing why it's not working because of all the stuff. Like, it's too much stuff, too much plastic, too much stuff. Anyway, that's my rant.
That's
So
a good rant.
yeah, it's a good rant, and it's clear we're all moving in a space that we might liken to decluttering education, right? Unfortunately, that's not a dis word; it's close, but it makes me think. Well, first off, I just want to say that that makes us disagreeable in the education space, right? It makes me think of a quote that John Dewey wrote in Democracy in America that I grabbed onto years ago, which is that the curriculum is nothing but the petty concerns of adults who are worried about their world, right? And we keep adding things in based on what adults are worried about. We're worried about this, we're worried about that. And all we do in education is add in. Um, what would it take in a school setting and or a policy setting, because you've got those perspectives, as Zach pointed out, we run pre-K to postgraduate basically. What would it take to start a conversation that was about um, taking away or dissolving education in order to arrive at the solutions that we're looking for in education, right? And a good solution, correct me if I'm wrong, please disagree, Colleen, but a good solution is nothing but dissolving certain things into another, right? But we don't ever do any, we talk about finding solutions in education, but we don't ever do any dissolving, right? So what do we think? What would it take for us as individuals doing our work, whether you as a consultant, Christina, or the work that you're doing with Littles, Colleen, and the work that you're doing now at Google, Zach? Like, what is it going to take to start dissolving some stuff into more effective solutions? Maybe I can get you to disagree this way.
You might disagree with me on this one. So I have an immediate answer that came to mind while you were speaking, which is vulnerability. We need to help educators become comfortable saying what they're not saying. And some of that is not just being aware that the capacity that is being placed on our plates is totally overwhelming us. And that because we've been the fixer, the caregiver, we love being needed for a lot of teachers. We just handle it all. We slap some duct tape on it. We put a Band-Aid over there and we make it work. And we pride ourselves on making it work. I think there's a vulnerability that comes from having the conversations honestly with your leadership and with your faculty that allow you to express, I can't do this anymore and I can't put anything else on my plate. And it's not because I'm not a good teacher, but it's because I need to have the capacity to do the job I'm actually supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And one thing that's been coming up in a lot of conversations I've had with other educators is that they feel this pull to fix the system because they see all the issues. You know, we're very aware, we're really analytical, but that's not your profession. You know, Zach actually went into policy design, right? Mm-hmm. There's a whole layer of the complexity that comes with change management and organizations and systems that educators, as well-meaning as they may be, don't have the professional practice to institute that kind of level of change. And I think we need to be vulnerable with ourselves and say, I cannot continue working at this pace and this is not sustainable, but have the conversation with leadership because they don't know what they don't know. And they will continue adding things and continue asking you to do more professional development. And, oh, you went to that conference. Can you present to everybody? Yeah, Colleen's laughing. Can you take on all of the science curriculum for our school? And our reaction is to say yes. Mm-hmm. So my pushback is to say, what are you not admitting to yourself? And what kind of conversation could you have with your leadership or with your faculty that allows them to be more vulnerable so that we can have more of a runway?
Mm-hmm. A lot to think about there. Do we need a filler moment while the other two of you think, or everybody ready to jump in?
I would say that sounds great, but I think we also just don't know how to disagree, right? And I know that is the premise. It is the reason that I raised my hand to have this conversation is that we're very bad at disagreeing, just as not even as a profession, but you know, as people. It's gotten very bad. I know that I am like saying, "Oh, look, there's a horse," but right. I get that we are all well aware of that, but I think not only that, we have lost the like. Why is that important? And I think the disagreement isn't just between factions, right? I think we don't know how to disagree inside of a group as well. I'm a huge fan of George Lakey, who writes about the importance of disagreement within a team. And I pulled up a couple of my favorite pieces from him. We never learn to do conflict well by avoiding it. If we tend to have a posture of aversion to conflict in shifting to a posture of embracing it, might be some of the spiritual advantage. Conflict is essentially unpredictable. There's no way you can really know how it's going to turn out. So it's like meeting for worship, but a little more dramatic, a little like an encounter with God. And I bring those in. I know that this is not a spiritual podcast. I know that I've just taken us to a much bigger realm, but I think that those words and that kind of sentiment from Lakey is really important for saying like this is bigger, right? Like not just Christina, to your point of like pushing back and saying I can't do this, but there's a whole skill set that's gone of being able to disagree and or have someone tell you no and not feel like the world has ended. Right? We're just everything is personalized.
Mhm.
Um, right. So the personalization has led to us think like I will log into social media platform X and everything I want is there. Right. There is not the more time I'm there, the more it is a pleasant experience for me. And so I don't know if you've ever done this, but like looked at another person's feed, like traded devices and scrolled and just like, oh, this isn't, wow, all of a sudden, like this app got less fun.
Mhm.
Um, and so that personalization, I think, has led to us not knowing how to be disagreed with. I tell my kids they're teenagers, and one of the pieces they'll ask me a thing, and I will tell, and sometimes the answer is no, and they will get that face. I think
Mhm.
we all know the face that I'm talking about, and then I will stop and say, "Oh, did you forget to check and see if you were okay with no before you asked your question?" Because that's the skill. Like, will I be
Mhm.
okay if the answer is no? Otherwise, I don't want to go down this road.
Yeah. Again, a lot to process there between the constant adding of stuff and then the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to hear people say no to you. And I think the disagreement within groups is also very important because I do think it's gotten harder and harder for us. Like we can only, um, you know, we have to have an enemy whenever we're talking about something we disagree with. We can't disagree with a friend, right? That's
Or
gotten
that disagreement makes you an enemy,
Yes. Well, I think that's part of what you're unpacking there. Colleen,
right? Like,
where would you want to go with this from your perspective, in terms of the vulnerability, in terms of the getting comfortable with disagreement and saying no? Um, just curious.
Yeah, I think it's been fascinating to observe what the realm of professional development and all of that is in a K through our school's K through 8
Mhm.
environment versus higher ed. We've had vehement disagreements at faculty meetings, over scientific principles, sometimes over pedagogy. Um, and left all friends in higher education, right? So in higher ed, when you're a faculty member, you're used, at least the scientists, we're used to arguing with each other.
Mhm.
That's not right. You can't say that. And that's just the culture. And in some ways it's very healthy. And you just, oh, okay, yeah, now I see what you're saying at the end. So for me, when I came to a K through 8 environment, I felt like like the emperor's new clothes. I'm like, doesn't it, like we're all seeing this, right? Like this guy doesn't have any clothes on and no one's saying anything. And we're getting all this stuff. And like, for example, we have a professional development half day tomorrow and no one knows even what we're doing, something about curriculum redesign. And everyone's like, what is that? But no one's saying anything. And so we're all going to sit there for 4 hours and have our time wasted because
so are you going to go?
I mean, yeah, and it's funny because like it's so weird to me. Like, yeah, I'm gonna go because I have to go.
But why?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, why?
Like
Like,
who
yeah,
do you know who has ever been fired for not going
to
to
a
a
PD.
PD?
I don't know yet. So,
Nobody.
yeah, no, but yeah, I think I did actually say, and again, I find that when we disagree with admin, there are conversations that are not held in front of admin, right? So that's very
Mm-hmm.
unhealthy,
Mhm.
so that you get that unhealthy like disagreement, but not with the clientele that you're disagreeing with. So yeah, to your point, Zach, I'll let you know if I'm going. But I'm sitting there going, so it is very different, at least in higher ed. In the sciences, chemistry departments, disagreements are part of faculty meeting. I mean, I never left one where there wasn't a
Do
disagreement.
you
Right.
do you think that's the dissertation? Do you think that's like the doctoral process, right? You like
Yeah.
you have to like the one of the last steps is defending something, right? Like I've had so many people go through the dis process and they had to, um they're getting feedback on their chapters and chapters and chapter and right, it's just you're arguing all the way through.
Hmm.
So it's just built into the job, and that's not the K-12
Mm-mm.
No,
process.
not at all.
Very, very different. Mm-mm.
No, not at all.
Um,
And it
but
is an important part of the socialization process in higher ed, right? Is that you um, learn not to take things personally, right? You learn that, well, this person is making this criticism because they're coming from a different perspective than you, right? They have a different
or
training.
working, or they see the data. I mean,
Yeah.
it's also data based, right? Like,
In
Yeah.
some cases, yeah. I mean, I was an historian, so there wasn't a lot of data, right? It was a lot of text, but and frameworks. But I'm still like we've had this opposition pop up between um, teachers and administration, right? Um, and I think that's part of it, but any principal will tell you they feel the exact same top-down pressures coming from district, and any district will tell you they feel the exact same pressures coming down from Department of Education in their state, and likewise up to the State Department of Education. And then there's the damn PISA test that everybody blames. Like, well, if it weren't for PISA, we could just do whatever we wanted, right? And I'm just going to go back to that question again. It sounds like part of it, how we create the runway is having the vulnerability to disagree within our groups, right? Rather than constantly making it an us and them struggle. Um, Once we cross that threshold, what should happen, right? Once we cross the threshold, like, okay, it's okay to disagree, right? And I'll just share an anecdote. I have a friend who's general counsel at Deloitte Touche, um, very successful attorney. He's known me since we were in college together, and he knows that I'm disagreeable, right? And I asked him one day, Ben, how many people does an innovative consulting firm like Deloitte Touche want who are like me? Right? I said, what is it, 10%, 5%? He's like, what are you kidding? It's less than 1%, right? I couldn't possibly imagine working with like hundreds of you or thousands of you, right? So moving forward, thinking about that, and Dana, feel free to jump in here also, right? Like if we get to the point where we can disagree at faculty meetings, right? Then what should happen, right? Is it just one or two people who stand up and be disagreeable and then everybody nods and we sort of make a minor change? Or do we think about ways that we can dissolve those differences into something meaningful and new? And I choose your word, Colleen, because I still think there's something really important about that idea of dissolving and dissolution. So, what should happen if we
Yeah.
learn to be disagreeable together?
So I just want to throw in there that, we talk about teachers being disagreeable, teachers saying no, teachers being vulnerable, administrators feeling the pressure from top down. But when do we ever stop and ask the kids and say, the kids that get labeled as disagreeable in the classrooms, maybe they're the ones that we should be listening to the most because we see them as the disruptive children. And quite frankly, more than likely, they are disruptive because they're either bored or they have not been fully supported. And so they are so completely lost that they are acting out. And so, if we take it down to the most basic level and start to figure out what's happening in the classroom with the disagreeable children, maybe we'd find some of the answers that we're searching for.
and 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 I think we find that those disagreeable children who are acting out didn't start by acting out, right? They
Mhm.
started trying to signal with the tools that they had to say, this is not working for me. And when a system keeps ignoring you over and over again, you have to escalate, or you're going to use the kind of next tool that you have in that toolbox. And so the acting out is actually, step 8 of this process, because
Mhm.
they tried to raise their hand, they tried to disagree. But if the system is not curious about what's going on with you, then it's just going to shut you down.
Yeah.
Um, And so I think that's the other piece that's key to this is the curiosity of
Hmm.
disagreement, right? Disagreement not being I need to show you you're wrong, but going back to Colleen's piece, and I think Tim to what you just talked about all levels of the system, disagreement being I don't agree with you and I would like to know why. Right? And so
Hmm.
coming to it like you think you see this differently and coming at it from a curious standpoint. I recently read Amanda Ripley's book from 2021. I do read books that have been written this year, but it's called High Conflict. And one of the pieces she talks about there, and I think it's really there's a bunch of stuff folks can Google about this, but the idea of looping, right, as the key to productive conflict. And so she makes the she disambiguates between high conflict, which is not productive, and healthy, productive conflict, where people like learn and communities are able to grow, which Lakey would also say. And one of the tools for productive conflict that she points out is the idea of looping to say, I think I heard you just say this. Right. So, and then really listening to the other person when they correct you on what you thought you heard. No, that's not what I was saying at all. Right. That moment, but that's time consuming. And I think that Dana, that gets to your point with the students too, right? If a student is disagreeing with us, we've got stuff to do. We don't have time to to tend to that. And we are in a position of authority, and the teacher preparation process tends to be one of authority.
Hmm.
And so it's much easier for us to shut it down if if something else is in our cultural norm.
Yeah.
Well, I think that looping is interesting. Do either one of you two want to build on that, Colleen or Christina?
I'll build on what Zach is saying because I think he kind of gave us the answer that after you get to this moment of agreeing to disagree and have those kind of conversations, you're entering curiosity.
Hmm.
Why don't we disagree? Or why don't we agree, to say it better? And to Dana's point, thinking about how I would sit with a student who was not, you know, behaving in the classroom the way I had expected and that other peers expected. And I have been really particular to not sit across from them because that breeds even more conflict and
Hmm.
feeling like we are adversaries. I usually like to sit next to them. And, if they're at an age where they can write and we can talk about it or design something, say, what is the problem that you're experiencing? What is the problem I'm seeing? Let's look at this from the same trajectory of trying to find out where we're both lining up, where we're not seeing each other's point of view. There was a great behavior management system, which I very much dislike the whole idea of behavior management, but it's
The hair on the back of my neck just went up,
I
Christina.
know I hate it. But there are some practices that could be better utilized if more people were aware of other options, of alternatives. So restitution comes
Hmm.
at behavior with this idea that students who are not behaving in the way you'd expected probably have unmet needs. And they
Mm.
list out 5 needs, I think it is. Basically, they're missing a need for play or for fun or for freedom. And, through the work that I've been doing, I've been distilling that down to the needs that are identified in self-determination theory. So
Hmm.
Mhm.
autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And, the psychological base of that being how humans are motivated and how we establish well-being or have that sense of well-being.
Hmm.
So if someone in the classroom does not have autonomy, they're probably going to react in some way, whether that's the teacher or the student.
Hmm.
Right.
And the sense of competence, can I fulfill what's being asked of me for the teacher or for the student or for leader, for anyone in this whole environment? And then the relatedness that is not superficial. It's not just because you are sitting here in my classroom, I know you, but
Hmm.
actually understanding them as another individual.
No, I think those are important points. And Zach, I'm going to jump up to Colleen because she hasn't had a chance to jump in recently. Um, what do you think about this issue of curiosity as part of the solution? Or you can go any other direction you want to also, but I just wanted to throw that out there, right? Is Christina right that sort of like when we get past the negativity of disagreement, do we enter into this curiosity space? And is that a better place to go?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So recently I've been I would go from curiosity to also link to that creativity.
Hmm.
Um, so one thing I did before with my Chem 101 students was I did this Torrance test for divergent thinking
Hmm.
with them. And it was a different kind of framework. I used it for their case studies, but I've been doing it with my littles and sharing the results. It's a creativity quotient that you come up with from coding their work and sharing it with their teachers. And they're shocked because towards the behavior end, they're used to high performers, and now I'm realizing that they're literally just performing, right?
Hmm.
And they're like, wow, like the kids who were off the charts for creativity, which would lead to curiosity and all the good juicy stuff that comes in with science, um, were not expected because they're not necessarily the high performers, right? So, um, anyway, it's been fascinating to kind of share with my new colleagues that, what is creativity? And it's, the ability to, when you're given some objects, are you seeing it as something that you can take apart and recreate something new, or can you repurpose it instead of using it as is in just a slightly different way? And so, anyway, it just got me to thinking a lot more about behavior and high performers and the
Hmm.
fact that they learn so young. I'm shocked how young they learn to perform.
Hmm.
And you can see it if you're looking for it. Like if you are testing for their divergent thinking, are they divergent thinking and looking at something with deconstruction, construction kind of eyes versus just being a good student, whatever that means. So
No, and
I'm
I
just
think that
opening it up.
that raises a really interesting question, Colleen, that goes back to something that Christina said about vulnerability, right? I think a big part of the conversation that we're dancing around is, are we willing to be vulnerable enough to believe that the system that we built was built on faulty assumptions, right? That the assumption that a kid who is a high performer is actually our best student. And I've shared this on previous DisEds, but it's hard not to share it at this time, right? My first principal once said to me, because I was working like 80, 90-hour weeks and burning out. And he was like, Tim, when are you going to learn that A students work for C students? Because A students spend all their time doing exactly what they're told, and C students are always looking for a way to get somebody else to do the work, right? They're divergent thinkers. They're not interested in doing what they've been told. They don't follow directions. Um, and I think that part of what we're talking about tonight is this need to be vulnerable and question a lot of the assumptions of the systems that we have, because they do stifle divergent thinkers, they do stifle creativity. And we've actually, and Zach, you've been part of some of these conversations at a higher level. Maybe you want to chime in, but our response as we're thinking about how to promote more creativity and more divergent thinking and more innovation has been to add layers and layers and layers of stuff that kids must be able to know and be able to do in order to be creative as opposed to take anything away. Right. And I feel like that's where this conversation has been going. And I'll let you all have a last word or two to start to wrap us up with that thought in mind.
I think it doesn't occur to us that we can do something different, right? I mean, to Colleen's point, right? I keep going back to Colleen, hoping you're not going to show up to that meeting tomorrow, um, but not as a like middle finger to your principal.
Right.
Don't do that because then I
No.
get an email that's like Colleen is looking for a job, um, and that's the difference, right? Not showing up because of a good reason and knowing that that is will be a good signal to start a conversation is different than being obstinate.
Yeah.
And those are different pieces, right? So like I didn't show up because we decided that this was the mission and vision of the school and these are our core values and you said this is what's most important and I needed to do this thing to get this thing done. Um, do you want to work together to make like I'd be happy to work with you to make sure that future meetings are like something of it, but I just can't sacrifice the kids learning to show up to another meeting that we had to have because it was already on the schedule, not because we needed it. Like those are different conversations than I'm not going to be there because those meetings are boring, right? Like the way we like Tim, to your point about being vulnerable, saying no isn't the vulnerable part. Saying no and being willing to have the conversation
Mhm.
that follows is the vulnerable part, right? This is the West Wing, right? What are the next 10 words?
Right.
Um, Quoting everything tonight. So it's that, this, I'm not going to do this, and that's going to make you feel some kind of way. And we're going to sit and we're going to just, that's the vulnerability that I think is important. This is my last book, I swear. I don't know. I like to read The Power of Positive Deviance. Has anybody else read this book?
Mm-mm.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. If you don't read any of the other books that I talked about, read this one. Richard Pascal, Jerry Sternin, and Monique Sternin. Right, it is an approach to problem solving and researching. It's fantastic. And the idea is that you go in and you're trying to solve a problem within a community, and someone has already solved it in a deviant way, right? By breaking some of the norms. But
Mhm.
because it's deviant, they don't talk about it. And so you go in, and so I can't remember the country, and I don't want to say it, but so they go into a country where a village where malnourishment, children are dying of malnourishment, but they have all the stuff they need, but not everybody is dying. And so the researchers go and they say, all right, who's not dying? Who is, at or above expectations for healthy weight? And they find the people, and in the example they offer in the book, they talk about these mothers who are feeding their children these foods that are kind of socially, like the shrimp or sweet potatoes, like these foods that otherwise are not
Mhm.
kind of valued, but because they're doing these things, their children are living. And so the researchers are like, oh, here's the deviant moment, right? By asking that, and then they say to the mothers who have solved this problem, how do you think, what do you think is the best way for us to spread this knowledge to your peers, right? They didn't just go out and write a paper. They didn't go to door and be like, you know what they're feeding them? That's making the difference. They said internal, how can we fix this problem? And I think that's the vulnerability, right? The researchers just saying, we're going to ask good questions. We're not going to spread all the right answers.
No, and I think we can certainly get behind deviance. Anybody else want to play on the deviance word?
I tried to make it dysphience, but it doesn't really
Yeah.
work.
Disobedience.
There you go.
Yeah, could be in there.
Yeah, you're
Um,
making me think of disrupt because it's disrupting. Yeah, right. It's
Well done.
disrupting the flow of information by actually understanding what needs to be said to who, when.
Hmm.
And we're
mhm,
not thinking about those parameters so much. Also, as we're kind of moving the conversation into thinking about children, and you brought up, some of the issues that children might have in our world, not to even mention what's happening in schools. I think there's an insidious nature to what we're kind of talking about with Colleen not going to this meeting or going to this meeting or doing the work that's on someone's plate and saying no about it, is that we're kind of weaponized as educators to do it for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this has to happen because you need to know the new curriculum because the
Don't you care about the
children,
children, Colleen?
mhm.
Well,
think about the kids.
I think
And
that's one place where you know, I always say I'm a loud old lady now. It's awesome. Like it's so cool. Like it's like, all right, here we are. Um, but I think, yeah, when I get that, I'm like, no, because I have seen those kids who got A's their entire life sobbing in my office because they got a D and they don't know how to do divergent thinking that's required in organic chemistry. They don't know how to. And so I think because of, almost like the what I have lived through, I can stand firmly footed and say, here's what I am doing for their kids. I'm developing these neural pathways
Mhm.
because that's the only thing we can bank on. They're like, they'll come to me like, they should be learning AI or what. I'm like, dude, like I'm telling you, there's five things that were used 100 years ago. Einstein, Schrodinger are going to be used 100 years from now, and every science that's in between, and this is it. And the tools are all going to change, but the neural pathways that are needed no matter what. And so, yeah, I can be feisty, feistier than I would be than maybe a 23-year-old me if I would have started teaching elementary school
Mhm.
science. But I really have been in the trenches and I've seen a lot, and I can't take it anymore. Like we have 50% failure rate nationally for underserved students in organic chemistry.
Mhm.
And it's been like that for 30 years. That data has not changed. So nothing we're doing worked and still not working. So I think because I come from all that, I can get feistier than if I was not privy to looking K through 16, K through 20, really, because my grad
Mhm.
students still had trouble with some of this stuff.
Yep.
So it gives you footing. But I think that's one thing we're not doing enough in education is we stop at 12. It's
Mhm.
like they just fall off the face of the earth then, and they have to start all over again. And let me tell you, it's not pretty freshman year what happens.
No, and I think there's, an interesting phenomenon that happens for a lot of teachers is they stop at their BA, right? They think they've learned everything they need to know because they finished that. I think that is another issue we have to tackle. But in the interest of time, right, I just want to wrap up and say this has been, as one might expect, given the crowd, and no, we did not plan this intentionally, Zach. This is sort of accidental chemistry of the participants, if I can use that metaphor.
Oh, Tim.
Um, right. But we all agreed that we need to learn how to be disagreeable without taking it personally in order to get to the space of curiosity, and that's vulnerable. But it's also something that um, allows us to see some things that are working because they're not the gold standard or the promising practice or whatever phrase we're going to use when we talk about education.
Distraction.
Or the distraction, right? Those things are also distractions, right? And Colleen, I hope you don't feel like we put a ton of pressure on you tonight to not go to your meeting tomorrow. But I do.
No, it was really good insight, and I also it made me realize that in higher ed, you're allowed to disagree, and I would be allowed to say, "Hey, I'm not going to the meeting. This is what I think's going on." I wouldn't even think about it. But in this new environment,
Hmm.
like I don't know the rules yet, right? So I think that's why, Zach, I was so like, I don't know. Like I've been doing this for 2.5 years now, and so I don't actually know like I don't know, can I skip stuff? Like,
Yeah.
but to your point, I should have a conversation if I do. But the rules before were easy because it was like, oh yeah, sure. If don't think it's going to be a good use of your time, you tell someone or you communicate it to the group and there was like, yeah, peace out, you go do your stuff. But yeah, it's a different environment and I'm just not sure how it works.
And Dana,
10 years helpful as that one too.
yeah. Any final thoughts from you in terms of how the conversation went tonight?
Yeah, so I bookend here. I start and I end, and Tim just keeps it flowing. And as I listen to the process and think about what do we need to discontinue in education, what is it that we're trying to dissolve in terms of layers of the system, and how do we, you know, dive into that disambiguation and make clear what needs to be done. And I think about the fact that maybe we need to start dispelling some notions in terms of education will only get better if, teachers worked harder, or
Mm,
I had the perfect class with kids that weren't disruptive, or the notion that the current systems are only going to work as long as they are properly funded and we just throw more money at them. And so it just leaves me with this lingering wonder of how do we dispel those pieces so that we can figure out what to discontinue, what to dissolve, and how to dive into that disambiguation.
yeah. Really nice way to wrap it up with dispelling, Dana. And I want to thank our guests tonight for joining us for what has been a very stimulating conversation. We won't be doing DIST next month in December. I'm going to be trying to disambiguate all of them and dissolve it into one big sort of dist highlights for the whole year with different outtakes from different things and try to stream it together. We'll see how it works out, but we'll definitely get this up for our audience to check out before the end of the week. And thanks so much for joining us tonight, all three of you. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Thank you.